If you've noticed in your yard, the flowers are beginning to bloom. And if you are paying attention to that, then you need to pay attention to the fact that it's time to start seeds indoors. I'm here today with Kathy Schmidt. I'm Joyce Riney. We're both master gardeners, and Kathy's had some experience planting and starting plants indoors, and so we want to go over with you sort of like the process of taking care of starting seeds indoors and then getting those seeds eventually into the garden. Okay, Kathy, could you start us out a little bit and talk to us somewhat about why start seeds indoors? We can always go out and buy plants. Why start them indoors?
Starting seeds is a much cheaper way to grow plants, flowers, vegetables, whatever, and it's fun. You know, winter is ending. It's time to have something fun and growing quickly. You can choose whatever plants you want, and it's all an experiment.
One of the things too is if you're planting your own seeds and growing your own plants, you have a little bit more control on whether or not they end up getting some kind of pesticides put on them. You can be chemical free if you're growing your own plants. Okay, let's talk about what all do you need if you're going to start your seeds indoors.
Well, you need a planting medium, and the easiest to use are these peat pellets that you could buy almost anywhere. Once you add water, and if you have a tray, you add water, and within about 3 minutes they get to this size. You open it and plant your seeds. You can also use seed starting mix. This is an organic seed starting block. You put it in a bucket and add a gallon of water. Within a few minutes you have a sterile seed starting. You can also just use potting mix, and that's what I do because I think it's a little bit cheaper.
Well, they always talk about when you're reading about this to be sure that you have sterile potting mix, not to be using like dirt out of your garden or something like that.
And don't use last year's potting soil.
Yeah, some of that maybe has some types of spores or things in it that might cause you a problem down the way. So we talk about, be sure you start with a good medium. Okay.
Yes.
What next?
Okay, well, you need the water and a watering can. I'm not next to a faucet, so I save my gallon jugs because once your seeds come up, it takes a lot of water. You need pots once the seeds have germinated to move them to the next step. Styrofoam cups are nice, but you can use anything, but you need to poke holes because you should water from below. I've actually used newspaper. It's really easy and you don't have to take it off. You just take a small can and roll it around and tuck it under and put your potting mix. I usually do this when I transplant the seedlings, and that goes right into the ground when it's ready or into a bigger pot. You can also use, this is a leftover or go home box. You can use this to start your seeds because it's covered. You just poke holes in the bottom. You need to put it in the tray so the water runs out. Use a spray bottle because you want to keep everything moist. This is a planting tray that holds, I'm going to try and knock it over, about 70 starts, and you like to keep it covered till you see the seedlings start to emerge. Then you put it under a light.
And if you have one of the other types of pots where it's open, one of your styrofoam pots or something, you can simply put some wrap over it and be sure to poke holes in it so that it can kind of aerate. And that works as well as some of the plastic covers.
If you're lucky enough that you have a seed heating mat, that helps germination a little faster. It keeps it at about 85 degrees, and you put your tray on top of that until the seedlings have emerged.
Okay. And
next you need your seed packet, and you want to read this fairly carefully. It tells you how many days till your seedlings should emerge, and I use a calendar because I can't remember. I also label my plants, and I try to write down when I planted it and, if you can, how many days to emergence, so I kind of know if my seeds are going to come up at all. The seed packet tells you what depth to plant and when to thin. And some of them come with actually a little sticker, and you could put when they're planted. I don't use that. I use labels, little sticky labels, and put on the side of my plant. And then I have popsicle sticks you can write down also.
You know, that record keeping is really one of the things you've really got to pay attention to, because when you're in there mixing up that medium and putting your seeds in there and you're doing so many things, it's easy to forget what's in this set of pots and what's in this set. And so you don't know if it's, say you're growing broccoli or you're growing something else, and then you don't know about how long it's going to take it to germinate. So you might panic. This didn't work. Nothing's coming up. But you have to have a record somewhat to know what to do.
And labels are important. Some of mine aren't labeled. I know 1 or 2 plants are labeled and I know what they are. But I've mixed some thinking, oh, I'll know that this is a zinnia and not a tithonia. So we'll see in a couple weeks if I still know.
Yeah, I've done that a lot of times myself and thinking, what is that plant? And until it puts enough leaves up that I can tell what it is, I'm in trouble. Okay, and of course, the other thing we've talked about, you know, the mix, we've talked about the containers, we've talked about the watering can and the water and so on, but we need to talk about the key ingredient, and that is light.
And you can germinate your seeds in a south-facing window, but that's not enough once the seedlings have started. You need more light. This is a plant light, and you'd like to keep it about 2 inches above your seedlings, and this one moves up. We'll show you in a few minutes another one that I've done with fluorescent lights. LED lights are considered best. These are old fluorescents that we've had in a box forever, so I'm using those, and they're on a chain. We'll move it up as the plants grow, again about 2 inches above the plants. The other thing you need is movement of the air. The plants need that to grow. So I have a fan on low that oscillates and reaches all my plants.
You know, so often people think, well, I'll get a jump start, and they go home and put everything in their seeds and set them by a window where they're getting light and think that's all I need to do. But that's just the first step. And if you don't have that grow light that's going to help them continue to grow, you're going to get these long, spindly kinds of plants, and they'll be very leggy, and they don't have the support to hold the plant up, and as a result it just kind of falls over. So if you don't want leggy, spindly kind of plants, then you're going to have a good grow light.
The other thing you need is fertilize, and I think the problem with that leggy plant is you should fertilize once the seedlings are a couple inches high every 2 weeks, and use 1/4 to half strength. Again, you put it, water, and put it in the basin, the tray, and in about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, if there's still water, use a baster or something to get the excess water away, because you don't want your roots to rot.
And we talked about fertilizer and what kind of fertilizer to use. Of course, you need it to be a liquid fertilizer, so it could be some kind of plant fertilizer that you mix up in a gallon jug and use based on what kind of strength that you need. And then another thing that you can do, if you have fertilizer that's like a 15, 30, 15 on bag, you can take spoonfuls, a teaspoon or a tablespoon rather of that, mix it up with water, and then you can use that for the kinds of plants that you're using, and we'll include that information at the end of our video.
Make sure you label your gallon jug with fertilizer, because it's easy when you're in a hurry to pour fertilizer when you don't need it. And that will make very leggy plants also.
One other thing about the light that we didn't mention is how much light do you need? And some of what I've read says you need about 15 hours of light during the day for your plants. And if you've got a timer to use where you can set your lights to come on for that 15-hour period, and then you need some downtime. Your plants need to rest and get away from the light for a little bit, but if you have it set on a timer, that takes care of a lot of the worry of, do I have it right?
And if you don't have a timer, which I'm not using, I turn the lights on when I get up, turn them off when I go to bed, and that's enough. That's easy.
And if you have your plants someplace that's not quite so handy, if you're have them out in your garage or someplace like that where you're not seeing them constantly or thinking about them constantly, then that timer really does help you take care of that need.
I have friends growing seedlings in their grown child's bedroom. Make sure you have an old oilcloth or plastic cloth to put over anything nice, because we're digging in the dirt here.
And we're splashing water.
And we're splashing water.
We've talked about some of the problems with things being leggy, because they're not having enough light. We've talked about the necessity of water, but one other problem that plants have sometimes when you're growing them like this is they get too much moisture, and as a result they have mold on the tops of the plant. You don't have to throw those plants out. You can just take a plastic knife or something and scrape the mold off the top of the plant, poke some holes in it with a toothpick or something in the bottom of the soil, so that the soil will aerate, and that plant will continue to grow and do a little bit better than in dealing with the problem with the mold. Okay, now when we say we've been successful, we've got our plants, we've got them growing, we've got them to a certain part, and now we're thinking about it's almost time to get them outside. We know the weather, we look at that and see what's going on, we want to move them outside. So now we need to talk about how do we get these plants ready? How do we harden them so that they're ready to be outside on their own?
And that's really difficult, because if they're looking good, you want to plant them in the ground. But first you need to take them to a shady area outside for 6 hours. You want the temperature to be probably 60 anyway, for 3 or 4 hours, and then bring them back in at night. Take them out and do this for up to a week, moving them a little bit more into the sun for very short times. And then after a week you can probably plant.
And you need to remember, if you're in a place like I am, my outdoors is full of wind because we live by an open field. And that wind can really dry those plants out. So if you tuck them in somewhere where it's not quite so windy, that's a good plan. But you need to check those plants and make sure they're not drying out too much. They've got to have that moisture. You don't want to go through all of this and weeks of taking care of them and then put them out and have them get scorched or burnt or die. Okay.
The one thing we didn't talk about before planting is how to make them bushier and fuller. And that's called pinching off. And when you get a couple sets of leaves, you can pinch with your fingers or you can pinch with scissors, and you'll get a bushier plant, fuller plant, and more blooms. And it's time to do that with several plants. I want to show you a couple plants too. These are snapdragons. These are about 6 days. They've just started to sprout. Snapdragon seeds are tiny, tiny, tiny. You can't plant one seed. So this is a plant that was planted about 2 weeks ago. It's time to decide what to do with this. Well, these that are growing here have roots. They might grow, and real plant lovers will plant all of these. Others just throw them away. What I like to do is I like to tear back the netting, and they suggest you cut all but the strongest plants, but I can't see wasting 10 good plants, so I'll try to tease them apart. This peat kind of falls apart. You can see there are a couple, and you can pull them apart and then plant them in your cup with a good amount of potting mix at this point, and then kind of baby them. And you can do that in the containers. And here's one that is doing very well, but there are a couple small, not very healthy seedlings. I'll pull those out. Here's 2 good ones, but they're so close together, I'll probably cut one and get one good plant. After the show, I may try to save it.
I know a lot of the directions talk to you about if you have several seeds and several plants coming up, you can just clip off some of the plants and just leave one there. But that's really hard to do as a gardener. And you always have friends who appreciate your handing off some plants to them and sharing your bounty with them. So that's always makes you a little reluctant to just clip those things and throw them away. Okay, we hope we've kind of given you an idea about what to do with your seeds and how to get them from the seed to the outdoors in your garden. Remember those 3 key things we've got to have. We've got to have water, We've got to have good soil, and we've got to have light. Out of those three, I think light is probably the most important and the most fragile thing that you've got to deal with. So get ready to start your seeds. Happy gardening.